Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another segment of Code Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. Our recitation today continues from Gaudi Mahalla Tija. These are a set of chants, and this one is the composition of the third Nanak Guru Amar Das. The recitation. Gaudi Mahalla Tija, Kaman Har Ras Bedhi Jio, Har ke Sahaj Subhaye, Man Mohan Mohliya Jio, Dubida Sahaj Samaye, Dubida Sahaj Samaye, Kaman Var Paye, Gurmati Rang Laye, Eho Sarir Kooੜੇ Kusat Bharya, ਇਹੋ ਸਰੀਰ ਕੂੜੇ ਕੁਸਤ ਭਰਿਆ ਗਲ ਤਾਈ ਪਾਪ ਕਮਾਏ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਭਗਤ ਜਿਤ ਸਹਿਜ ਧੁਨ ਉਪਜੈ ਬਿਨ ਭਗਤੀ ਮੈਲ ਨ ਪਾ ਜਾਏ ਨਾਨਕ ਕਾਮਣ ਪਿਰਹਿ ਪਿਆਰੀ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਆਪ ਗਵਾਏ ਕਾਮਣ ਫਿਰ ਪਾਇਆ ਜੀਓ ਗੁਰ ਕੈ ਭਾਏ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਰਹਿਣ ਸੁਖ ਸੁੱਤੀ ਜੀਓ ਅੰਤਰ ਉਰ ਧਾਰੇ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਅੰਤਰ ਉਰ ਧਾਰੇ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਅਨ ਦਿਨ ਦੁੱਖ ਨਿਵਾਰੇ ਅੰਤਰ ਮਹਿਲ ਪਿਰ ਰਾਵੇ ਕਾਮਣ ਗੁਰਮਤੀ ਵਿਚਾਰੇ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਨਾਮ ਪਿਆ ਦਿਨ ਰਾਤੀ ਦੁਬਿਧਾ ਮਾਰ ਨਿਵਾਰੇ ਨਾਨਕ ਸੱਚ ਮਿਲੀ ਸੁਹਾਗਣ ਗੁਰ ਕੈ ਹੇਤ ਅਪਾਰੇ ਆਵੋ ਦਇਆ ਕਰੇ ਜੀਓ ਪ੍ਰੀਤਮ ਅਤ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਕਾਮਨ ਬਿਨੋ ਕਰੇ ਜੀਓ ਸੱਚ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਸਿਗਾਰੇ ਸੱਚ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਸਿਗਾਰੇ ਹਉ ਮੈਂ ਮਾਰੇ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਕਾਰਜ ਸਵਾਰੇ ਜੁਗ ਜੁਗ ਏਕੋ ਸੱਚਾ ਸੋਈ ਬੂਝੈ ਗੁਰ ਵਿਚਾਰੇ ਮਨ ਮੁਖ ਕਾਮ ਵਿਆਪੀ ਮੋਹਿ ਸੰਤਾਪੀ ਕਿਸ ਆਗੇ ਜਾਏ ਪੁਕਾਰੇ ਨਾਨਕ ਮਨ ਮੁਖ ਥਾਉ ਨ ਪਾਏ ਬਿਨ ਗੁਰ ਅਤਿ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਮੁੰਦ ਇਆਣੀ ਭੋਲੀ ਨਿਗੁਣੀਆਂ ਜੀਓ ਫਿਰ ਅਗਮ ਅਪਾਰਾ ਆਪੇ ਮੇਲ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਜੀਓ ਆਪੇ ਬਖਸ਼ਣ ਹਾਰਾ ਅਵਗਣ ਬਖਸ਼ਣ ਹਾਰਾ ਕਾਮਣ ਕੰਤ ਪਿਆਰਾ ਘਟ ਘਟ ਰਿਹਾ ਸਮਾਈ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਭਾਇ ਭਗਤੀ ਪਾਈਐ ਸਤਿਗੁਰ ਬੂਝ ਬੁਝਾਈ ਸਦਾ ਆਨੰਦ ਰਹੇ ਦਿਨ ਰਾਤੀ ਅਣਦਿਨ ਰਹੇ ਲਿਵਲਾਈ ਅਣਦਿਨ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਹਿਜੇ ਹਰ ਵਰ ਪਾਇਆ ਸਾਧਨ ਨਾਉ ਨਿਧ ਪਾਈ The metaphor of the Suhagan and the Kaman continues, the theme being further elaborated. So the Guru says that this physical body is a temporary structure, but it is neck deep in sensual depravity. Kaman eh sarir kood kusat bharya gal tai, neck deep, paap kamaye. So what is paap kamaye? It accumulates a toxic residue of ignorance through misguided actions. That is the paap kamai, missing the mark. And collecting the residue means acting out of a center of ignorance, which is the ego. So all of the actions that are being done through the ego are misguided, and they leave behind a residue. And the residue is what binds you into repeating the cycle over and over again. And that is the cause of our unrest and unhappiness. So without devotion and dedication, bin bhakti to Gur wisdom, Gurmukhe, the cumulative deception of the ego of haume cannot be removed. Mail na jaye. So what do? When the mind bride, the Kaman, devotes itself with love to Guru wisdom, Gurmukh Bhakti, with the guidance of Guru wisdom, devotion, dedication. When the mind bride, the Kaman, does that, devotes itself, then within the mind a state of sahaj, equipoise, sahaj dhun upajay. Dhun, sound, vibration. So the mind becomes tranquil. So in other words, its frequency changes from turbulence to tranquility. And into such a state of tranquility flows love for the Har Self. Har Ras Bedhi Jio, Har ke Sahaj Subhai. And this experience is not only mesmerizing, mana mohana moha liya jio, but it also solves the dilemma of the ego haume consciousness. Dubida sahaj samay. So it does both things. And fortunate is that mind bride that finds her beloved self by losing her sense of separation. So ego consciousness, ego haume, is really the crux here, because that is what causes this illusory sense of separateness that creates objects around us. So it's the subject-object dichotomy that gets created by nature and which we have to overcome because it is defective. So the mind bride, who is guided by Guru wisdom, learns how to plumb the depths of its own being in search of the Har Self, because the Har Self, or the husband here, Pir, is the essence of a human being. And the essence doesn't really have a shape until you give it a shape. And so therefore, you have to turn around and dive deep into yourself so that you can become familiar and acquainted with your own essence. Antar Mahal Pir Rave Kaman Gurmati Vichare. Through Gurmat, Gur wisdom. Gur wisdom will teach you how to turn inwards and access the depths of your own being. And when you find the self deep within, the mind then finds restful sleep. The Guru says, Rain Sukha Sutti Jio Antar Urdhare. Again, the turbulence of the mind settles down. And in that domain of the self, in that space, sacred space within, there is no sorrow. Antar urdhare miliye pyare, and then andena dukha nivare. Dukh, sorrow, obstructions, they disappear because your vision is clear. You're experiencing a unified consciousness. It is not fragmented, meaning it's not conditioned. You're not making decisions based on biases, memory, and so on. You're looking at every situation afresh because it is possessed of self-knowledge. It's ready to deal with any situation. So the mind bride, when it reaches the depths of its own being, is face to face with its essence. which is the self, which is the husband self, the owner, so to speak, because that is what is animating the body. The body has no animation on its own. So you're face to face with yourself, essentially, and you transcend your conditioned mind. And that mind is what is called a suhagan, that has found its husband, so to speak, that is alive with and throbbing with its husband self. So the gurus have used metaphors from daily life. A bride longing for her husband because she's separated. She's separated because her loyalties are divided in whichever way you want to think about it. If you look at typical households, you have this issue of a woman being divided between loyalty to her in-laws and to her parents, for instance, just as an example that we see within Indian culture, for example, and obviously everywhere, and to varying degrees. So the gurus have used the metaphor of a marriage because it is something we all recognize and understand. Divided loyalties means estrangement from your partner. You have to be committed. You have to build harmony, which is an internal thing. You could be living under the same roof and lacking in intimacy with each other, you see. So the gurus have used this example to help us understand the estrangement of the mind as the bride, missing her husband's self because of divided loyalties. Divided loyalties here are caused by the ego home. And this is, by the way, all by design. That is the nature of creation. And so therefore, the ask from us is to penetrate that and to evolve to the next domain of consciousness, to have that unified experience. So discernment of the self as the eternal and unchanging essence comes through Guru wisdom. We have already established that. But what about ego, haume-driven manmukhs, individuals? They can't realize this because, as we said, their vision is fogged by the hot breath of desire and attachments, the Guru says. Manmukh kaam vyape moh santape. Kis aage jio pukare? Where should a manmukh turn? And then the Guru advises us, he tells us. First he says, plead with the self to come abide within. Avo daya karo jio pritam at pyare. Along with the petition, begin to engage with the sabad of Guru wisdom. As we noted earlier, the sabad is the message in the form of language that we can understand of Guru wisdom. And that becomes the path. That becomes the passage into the self, which is beyond language. But you begin with the sabad as you receive it. And you work from there. And as the engagement with the sabad deepens, the residue of ego haume begins to dissolve. Sach sabad sigare haume mare. And then Guru wisdom guides you to the goal. Gurmukh karaj savare. So without that guidance of the Guru Enlightener, you're not going to get rid of your ego haume. Nanak manmukh thau na paye bin gur at pyare. You will find no rest. You need the wisdom of the Guru. And by the way, the Guru is both a technique, spiritual knowledge, enlightener. All of this is already woven into our structure. We are just not aware of it. So when we read Gurbani, that is the first step to connect with the Gur within. And the Gur within will take you to yourself. So there is this progression that you have to bear in mind. That is why Guru Nanak, Guru Amar Das in this passage stresses this repeatedly. That is what we should do. And in the end, the Guru, as is their wont, reiterates this by saying, my bride, it is artless and lacking in any redeeming quality. It's limited. Mund iyani poli diguni jio. How can that artless, without capacity, ego self, look and find the husband self who is agam apara, without, beyond reach and transcendent? You see, how do you do that? How do you make that effort? And the response that they give is that the beloved self is all pervasive and resides everywhere. So it is within you as well. So it understands, it hears you. It is the Redeemer and the one who makes union possible. And the self is found through, again, loving devotion and guidance of good wisdom. So the point here is that an individual should not get carried away into believing that it has the capacity to actually find the self. It doesn't, no matter what you do, because you're still acting out of the ego. You have to plead ultimately. You have to beg for grace to happen. And the Guru assures us that it does happen when you ask for it with love and devotion. That's the key. On that note, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.